On a quiet night in February 2023, the passengers aboard Train 62, students, workers, families, sat comfortably, unaware of the horror that awaited them. The rhythmic hum of the train's wheels against the tracks was almost soothing, a familiar lullaby for weary travelers. But in the distance, on that same track, a freight train was hurtling toward them. Neither train knew the other existed. The stationmaster, working alone that night, had unknowingly sealed their fate with the flick of a switch. The passengers continued their journey, but 12 minutes later, their world would be engulfed in fire. When the impact came, it was not just a collision of steel, but a catastrophic failure of an entire system. A failure built over decades of neglect, corruption, and ignored warnings. In an instant, Greece would be thrust into mourning. But as the smoke cleared, one question remained. Was this truly an accident, or was it something far worse? This is the story of the deadliest train disaster in Greece's history. Before we start, please take a second to click on that subscribe button, as it's the best way to support this channel. To understand this tragedy, we have to go back, not just to that night, but to the years, even decades, leading up to it. Greece's railway system had long been a ticking time bomb, plagued by underfunding, mismanagement, and outdated technology. The Athens-Thessaloniki line was one of Greece's busiest railway routes. But despite its importance, the system relied heavily on manual signaling. In a modern rail network, automatic safety systems prevent such disasters by stopping trains before they enter danger zones. But in Greece, those systems were either not working or never fully installed. For years, railway workers had sounded the alarm. They warned of staff shortages, poor maintenance, and the urgent need for modern safety measures. But their calls went unanswered. Instead, the government pushed privatization efforts, selling off the state-owned railway operator in 2017 to an Italian company called Hellenic Train. The company was responsible for operations, while the Greek government still oversaw railway infrastructure. But instead of investment, the system fell deeper into neglect. It was this neglect that allowed a single mistake to become a catastrophe. On the night of February 28, 2023, Train 62, a passenger train bound for Thessaloniki, glided through the countryside. Many of its passengers were young students, returning to university after a long weekend. Unbeknownst to them, at the Larissa railway station, a critical error had just been made. A 59-year-old stationmaster was working alone, overseeing multiple tracks and train schedules. He mistakenly routed the passenger train onto the wrong track. That track was not empty. Further down the line, a freight train, much heavier and moving fast, was coming straight toward them. But neither train knew it. The safety system that should have warned the drivers and stopped the collision wasn't operational. Had it been active, an automatic emergency stop would have been triggered. Instead, both trains were on a collision course, hurtling toward disaster at a combined speed of 186 miles per hour. For 12 full minutes, the two trains unknowingly shared the same track. At exactly 11:21 p.m., the two trains, each weighing hundreds of tons, slammed into each other head-on with unimaginable force. The crash was instantaneous and catastrophic. The first two carriages of the passenger train disintegrated on impact, crushed beyond recognition. The third carriage erupted into flames, the force of the explosion turning metal into molten debris. The freight train, carrying flammable cargo, added fuel to the inferno. Inside the passenger train, chaos erupted. People were thrown from their seats, bodies slammed against walls, luggage and debris flew through the air. Some passengers never had time to scream. The force alone was enough to take their lives in an instant. For those in the middle and rear carriages, the nightmare had only just begun. Survivors found themselves trapped in a nightmare of twisted metal and fire. The heat inside the wreckage soared to over 1,300 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt steel. Flames consumed the train, thick black smoke filling every crevice. Some passengers managed to kick out windows, dragging themselves onto the tracks. Others desperately pulled fellow travelers from the burning carriages, their hands seared by the heat. First responders arrived within minutes, But the flames were too intense to reach the worst of the wreckage. Firefighters battled through the debris, but in some cases, there was nothing left to save. Many of the bodies inside the front cars were so badly burned. By the time the flames died down, 57 people had lost their lives. In the following days, the grim task of identifying the victims began. Many bodies were burned beyond recognition, requiring forensic teams to rely on DNA testing to confirm identities. Families anxiously awaited news of their loved ones, while the entire nation watched in shock as more details emerged about the catastrophe. As news about the accident spread across Greece, rage boiled over. Within hours, protests erupted in Athens, Thessaloniki, and Larissa. People flooded the streets, demanding justice. They weren't just angry at the stationmaster, they were furious at the entire system that had allowed such a disaster to happen. This wasn't just human error, the protesters chanted. This was a crime. The anger was directed at decades of government inaction, at the officials who ignored warnings, at the companies that prioritized profits over safety. The Greek government, struggling to contain the backlash, scrambled to respond. The first major fallout? The transport minister, Kostas Karamanlis, resigned. In a public statement, he admitted that the country's railway system was far behind modern safety standards. But to the public, this was not enough. They wanted real accountability. And soon, the stationmaster was arrested, charged with manslaughter and criminal negligence. But as investigators dug deeper, it became clear that he was not the only one to blame. The official investigation into the crash revealed a shocking truth. This tragedy had been waiting to happen. The European train control system, a safety system that could have prevented the collision, had been partially installed, but never activated. EU funding had been available for railway upgrades, but progress had been slow, and money meant for safety improvements had seemingly disappeared. Railway unions had issued repeated warnings about the dangers of overworked staff, outdated equipment, and broken signals. Even weeks before the crash, employees had gone on strike to demand better safety conditions, but their warnings had been ignored. The crash had severe political consequences. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis initially blamed the tragedy on human error, a statement that only fueled more public outrage. People saw it as an attempt to shift responsibility away from systemic failures. Under immense pressure, the government pledged sweeping railway reforms. They promised to modernize infrastructure, to fully implement safety systems, and to hold officials accountable. But trust in the system had already shattered. The privatization of the railways also came under scrutiny. Some argued that selling off the rail operator had led to cost-cutting at the expense of passenger safety. Others pointed out that the real issue was the Greek government's failure to properly manage and maintain its railway infrastructure. 2 years after the crash, progress has been painfully slow. Some safety improvements have been made, but the full implementation of automated systems remains unfinished. For many Greeks, the question lingers, has anything really changed? The anger only grew. On the second anniversary of the crash, in February 2025, tens of thousands of people, predominantly young people, gathered in over 260 cities and villages across Greece and abroad, demanding justice and denouncing any attempts at a cover-up. In Athens, the atmosphere was charged with emotion as demonstrators held banners and chanted slogans seeking accountability for the tragic incident. The rally was temporarily disrupted due to violent clashes between the police and some protesters outside the Parliament building. The anniversary also saw a nationwide 24-hour strike organized by major trade unions, including the General Confederation of Greek Workers and the Civil Servants Confederation. This strike led to widespread disruptions in public services, including transportation and healthcare, amplifying the impact of the protests. Even as protests raged, many fear that real change would never come. The 2023 Greece train disaster was the result of years of neglect, corruption, and systemic failure. The loss of 57 lives was avoidable, and for the families who lost their loved ones, the pain remains unbearable. But beyond grief, there is also an anger that fuels the ongoing fight for accountability. The tragedy serves as a dark reminder of what happens when safety is ignored, when warnings are dismissed, when human lives are treated as expendable. And until real change happens, the people of Greece continue to ask, how many more warnings will it take before history stops repeating itself? As Greece moves forward with railway modernization efforts, the lessons from this disaster must not be forgotten. Only through investment in infrastructure, implementation of modern safety technologies, and a commitment to accountability can the Greek railway system regain public trust and prevent future disasters.